I'm back with more ideas about how to improve and enjoy your Lanshan 2 tent. I've had loads of great comments and suggestions since the last video. I've also racked up loads more nights in the tent. I'm up to nearly 100 now. Some of these ideas are already shown in my video about the Lanshan 1. Some of them are brand new. So let's get started. And here we are. I feel like an estate agent showing you around the tent. What I've done is to create a lot more space in the front vestibule, if you like, which is great when you're getting dressed, packing, unpacking, cooking in inclement conditions. I've taken a length of Dyneema that's 5 meters. So what I've done is taken it from one corner of the door and I've taken it all the way out and then back the other side to the other bungee at the other bottom of the other door. And that, when it's tensioned up, pulls both those doors up and out and hugely increases the amount of space you got inside the vestibule. Now the details of it, just a bowline on one side, and on this side I always have a little carabiner clip here for holding the door open for airing, and it's very useful. And that runs down to, I've got a little cleat there, it's an MSR cleat, you could use anything, and that allows me to tension it. So I found this really useful, and you can modify it a little bit if I just show you. So if it's a bit more rainy or whatever, I would just loosen this cleat, and that would allow me to tighten up this zip. So I've got like a halfway house around the cover. A lot of people have asked me about these sort of round oval shaped clips. They are a godsend. So basically they are a way of attaching a line to the fabric without having to make any holes. They come in 2 pieces. One pushes through the fabric into the outer and then turns to lock, and then there's some holes you can thread some cord through. In this particular instance, what I've used it for is to just do a loop around the bottom of this carbon pole, and that stabilizes the bottom of this side of the tent, which has proved really useful. You could also, I guess, use them halfway along the doors if you wanted to give some flexibility about how much the doors opened, or any number of other applications. And so far I'm happy to report that they don't seem to damage the fabric of the tent at all. If you take them off, there is a bit of sort of stretching that eases out quite quickly over time. Now you'll know that I'm particularly keen on reducing the amount of sagging on the inner of these tents and getting the corners nicely upright, and I seem to have achieved that this time, so it's looking fairly good. The short amount of bungee in the side or corner seam is helping a lot. What I've been exploring with also to help with this is the attachment at the top of the tent, where the inner hooks onto the outer, and I've shortened that quite significantly in order to pull the top of the inner up a bit better. That's bringing the inner a bit closer to the ridge, but I'm pretty proud of getting quite a taut and nearly straight, if you don't look at too closely, a ridge line. And so I haven't had any problems with the inner getting too close to the outer so far. That's where these long guy lines with a lot of tension to them really help. So really tight main guy lines, so you've got the minimal dip in the fly sheet, and that's meant that I've got half decent separation still, even though I've shortened the bungees for the clips to the inner. One trait of the fabric that the Lanshan's made out of is that it relaxes a bit when it gets damp, and that's shown here. So the slightly baggy areas are still damp, and the more flat areas have dried out already in the morning sun. So when you're pitching the tent, it's perfectly okay to make the really tight, because inevitably as it gets condensation and rain potentially affecting it, the fabric will relax. Next thing I want to talk about is a different way of achieving a good pull-out point on the side of the tent. The side pull-out points are really important to getting good separation between the inner and the outer, and to getting lots of nice internal volume inside the inner. And up to now I've been using these short carbon fibre poles. Now sometimes out in the wild when I don't have the sticks, I'll use a twig or a branch and sort of do some sort of makeshift compromise solution, and that can work really well. Here is a good way of getting the separation without having to use a pole. Look, no pole, but we're still getting a good amount of lift and separation between the outer and the inner. So the secret is that instead of using a pole, I've used the concept of a catenary line. That means that I've run a length of Dyneema cord from the apex of the tent, from one end of the ridgeline, down through the put-out point in the side, and out to a pick-out point that is, I would say, between 2 and 3 meters away from the side of the tent. When I apply tension to that line, it wants to straighten, and because it's been threaded through the pull-out point, that lifts the pull-out point up and away. I've used very thin Dyneema cord. It's a 2mm line, so it's very difficult to spot. Excellent trip hazard, by the way. But what it means is that I don't have to use a pole, because this length of line does the lifting and separating on its own. I've made sure when I place the peg out for the line that it means that the guy line is absolutely straight from the apex of the tent through the put-out point on the side and out to the peg. One of the problems with these tents is that there's only one internal pocket to store your stuff in, and it's this little one at the end of the tent, and frankly it's only just about big enough for a phone and not much else. But I tend to have a lot of things scattered around the tent that I want to try and keep tidy. So what I'm doing these days is using one of these bags. Now these are readily available in most supermarkets now. Buy the fresh produce. Tesco and Sainsbury's do them, I know. They cost about 50p, and the idea is that you put in your potatoes or apples or something like that before you go and pay for them. But it's a very fine mesh. The bag weighs next to nothing, and it's got a draw cord around the top. So I've got a couple of these, and I simply hook them up on these hooks at the top of the tent. And that's a really handy place to keep things out of the way. So my next suggestion is a little hook for hanging things up inside the tent. Now I don't know if this counts as a modification or just a hack, but I'm always needing to hang things up out of the way, and so what I've done is taken a plastic hook and I simply put a loop of bungee through the hook hole, and then that can go around the pole and wrap back over itself. I think you can hopefully see from the image what I've done. And then the hook's a really useful place to hang up things like just my trash bag I hang up there inside the tent. Look, it works. The one thing I always forget to take it off the walking pole, and only rediscover it when I'm like half a mile down the trail. But it's a quite secure way of attaching it, and if you've got a pole like this with sections, it can't slide any further down, so it works really well. The next thing we're going to talk about is the footprint that I'm using on the tent these days. So to start with, I use the factory footprint that you can get with the tent, and it's made to measure and it works very well. I've got no complaints with it at all, but it weighs quite a lot, I think about 150 grams. And I want to try and cut down its weight as much as I can. And also I wanted to have a bit more space that I could use in the vestibule. So what I've done is to make my own footprint now out of Polycro film, and this is the same film that you use in kits to make secondary double glazing at home. Now the stuff I buy on Amazon comes in widths of 1.5 meters, and that means that I can extend it a bit beyond the inner to give me a bit of working space outside. I've cut it to size. I've had to cut some slots for the pole to go in. I simply put some duct tape on the Polycro and then cut a slot in it for the pole to go in. And on the corners I've just attached the bungees using duct tape to the corner of the Polycro. I've weighed this and it now weighs around 70 grams, so I think I've saved myself about 70 grams of weight total, and I've got more space because I found that having this little bit of area in front is really handy when you're getting in and out of the tent, putting your shoes and boots on or whatever, or cooking. It's just that bit of extra working space makes the world of difference, and it's lighter and it's much cheaper as well. I've switched out the bright yellow Dyneema guidelines for some more muted black ones. Although the yellow made it less likely that I'd trip over the things whilst I was walking around the tent, they were a little bit bright and didn't really fit in with the stealth ethos. Now these are 3mm Dyneema. I think they're a bit overkill, and I'm considering swapping these in for 2mm. I really wish that everywhere I wanted to pitch my tent was as flat and smooth and beautifully grassed as this lawn is. Not always the case. So what I've taken to doing to make sure that I find a nice spot to put my tent is I get out the poles, set them at put the height I'm going to want them for the tent, which is, I usually start with them about 125, and then I lay them on the ground, and the idea is that the poles kind of mark out the area where I want the footprint of the tent to be. And when I've done that, I can sort of step back and look to see how level it is, whether there's a slope, whether it's the best place. I can also examine the area in detail for rocks or stones or twigs or whatever that are going to give me an uncomfortable night. On these bungees at the bottom of the doors, these days what I've done is to put different colour bungees on. The usual situation is that I tend to be opening the right hand door more than the left, just because the way that I work in the tent, and so I have to usually leave the left hand door shut, and so I put a slightly thicker bungee, which is the white one, on the left hand door, and a slightly thinner black one on the right hand door, which is the one that I open and close more often. And that has saved me countless amounts of fumbling and confusion about which bungee I'm supposed to be unhooking. The other thing that I do these days, particularly if it's going to be breezy, I tend to cross them over, and the reason is that then each bungee is kind of pulling in the best direction for the door that it's controlling. So the black bungee is putting in a good direction for the right hand door, and the white bungees are pulling in a good direction for the left hand door, if you follow me. So using this system, it's easy to know which bungee you're unhooking. It's a bit stronger, and the direction of the bungee pull better suits the tent as well. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know how you get on in the comments, and if you've got any suggestions of your own, then I'd be really keen to find out and hear about them. In the meantime, just subscribe to the channel for more videos of me out and about using the tent.